And welcome back to another episode of Metal Mastermind. My name is Ken Candelas, and I am joined by my partner.
Jason Stallworth. What's up, everyone?
Excellent. Jason, again, thanks for joining me on this. This is such an awesome thing to do with you. Let's just go ahead and get right into it, man. So, one of the greatest challenges, right, of being a musician is forming a band, right? How many bands have you been in, Jake?
Dude, probably let's see, I could quickly count real quick. I know my very first band, so to speak, I was actually playing in a little church and we formed this thing called Revelation, because we were trying to be like hardcore but in church and that kind of fit. And then I was also in a band. My first real band though was a band called Palin Genesia, which means a new beginning in Greek, and we're kind of like a rock alternative band way back in the mid 90s. And count the guys, and I've probably only been in less than five bands, dude, to be honest with you, maybe four. So that's about it. What about you, dude? How many bands have you been in? I know you've got the Homeric project, and I
I've
know
been
that's
in a
going through
couple
some change right
bands.
now.
Yeah, I've been in a couple
Yeah.
bands. The first band I was in was called New Street Audio. It
New
was a
Street Audio.
New Street Audio. Yeah, that band was it was a basement project that I was working with a couple of dudes, and we basically made a bunch of No Doubt covers.
Nice, dude.
Yeah, they were big fans of
That's
No
great.
Doubt. I played in another band called Tastes Like Bacon.
You told
um,
me about that band, dude. We
yeah,
talked about that one a long time ago,
yeah, it
man.
was a long
Nice, dude.
time ago, man. Oh, it was fun. I also played in another band called the Take Tones. The Take Tones was a very like eclectic sort of um, dance type rock type of band.
Dance rock.
Dance
That's
rock,
interesting, dude.
yeah.
That's really interesting.
But the
Yeah.
lead singer was a huge giant fan of Yngwie Malmsteen. So
Really?
yeah, yeah. That was sometimes. Then what else? Oh, I played also in another band called All the Queen's Men. That one was fun. We had some really great musicians there, but that
Nice, dude.
band broke up due to like contracts and stuff like that. They didn't want to get into all of that. They kind of wanted to keep it more of a
Ah,
hobby, which we're going to talk about today, right?
yeah.
So,
We are gonna talk about that, man. That's because I'm glad you brought that up. They want to keep it more to a hobby because I think for a lot of bands, it might even be better to keep it at that level. And you guys will see some of the reasons why as we dig into the meat and potatoes here.
oh yeah,
So, dude, Ken, tell me your thoughts. Because our first thing we want to bring up as far as bands go is kind of my like personal statement is bands are actually like a little form of polygamy. Kind of like, a
sure.
relationship of band members is kind of like being in this giant marriage to all these different people. So, what are your thoughts on that, dude?
Uh, I think you're absolutely right. I think people who have never played in a band never understand that
Yeah.
because it's not like just a couple of friends. It's friends who you consider either brothers and sisters, and you spend a lot of time, creating emotional music. And
Yeah.
that really does feel in many ways like a marriage because now there's also everybody who's committed is committed because of passion, much like a relationship, right? And then of course you have the entire input of, financial money and whatnot, stuff like that. People are investing, whether it's in their gear, whether it's in, promotion, these sorts of things. So you're talking about a shared idea where people have to be on the same page. And yeah, it's like a marriage, but it's not a marriage with just one person. It's a marriage with like four more people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's
you
like there's a
know?
huge investment in time, in money and resources, and also the investment in emotions, like you just said. So I think we first want to talk about, guys, is seeking out the best members for your band. Okay, so one of those things is what I want to talk about first is, because here's how bands a lot of times start, usually between two friends. And I guess I want to bring that point up first. Is starting a band with a friend a good idea? When is it not a good idea? And should you start a band just because it's your friend? You know what I mean? So, Ken, you've had some experiences down that road. So, what are your thoughts, man? Like, say, let's say you got a buddy and say, "Hey, dude, let's start a band." What are some of your initial thoughts with that? Like today, going through what
I
you've
mean,
been
look,
through in the past.
there are two stories to that, because starting a band with buddies is really, really cool, and it's a good idea as long as that person is just as serious as you are in almost every regard to that. Because what usually ends up happening is people get excited in the beginning, and then over time it either dwindles or it becomes one-sided.
Yeah.
And that happened to me. It happened to, even I'm currently part of another band as well. It's Four Trips Ahead, hard rock, melodic metal type stuff.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever showed you. Now that I
No,
talk
man,
about
this
it.
is the first time I'm learning about this, dude. We need to talk
The
about our friendship here,
unveiling.
Ken.
So yeah, no, like I mean, I do my own project, but I am also part of a
Yeah.
band. We haven't played in a while because of the pandemic. We haven't really gotten together to
Yeah, the same.
rehearse.
Yeah.
But the that band, from the get-go, it was different for me because I wasn't part of the band
Mhm.
from the beginning. I came into the band, so my responsibility within that is not like it is for me with Homeric, right? So
Gotcha.
if you are coming into a band that already exists, it needs to be thought of more in a business sense. If it's
Yeah.
starting from the beginnings, it's definitely going to have more of an emotional sense, right? And your duty to that group is going to heavily play on how it began for you, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's very difficult when you have founding members of a band and then all of a sudden at some point they don't see eye to eye, and it becomes devastating to that project. Sometimes it even ends, right? It's like, well, we couldn't agree, so we broke up the band and we don't do it anymore. It's very
Almost like a
hard
good
in many
friendship, really,
situations to kind of move on from that,
Yeah.
because if that foundational part of it was between two or more important people and they broke up on that, you taking on, if you're that person who wanted to keep playing the music, you taking on that role. Think about a band like Boston, for example, right? Classic rock. More than a
I was just reading about Tom
feeling,
Schultz, dude.
more than a
Like literally just
feeling,
reading about
right?
him.
Yo, you get a band like
Yeah.
that where their first record was the album for Boston, right? And then
It was great. Yeah.
the moment the singer died, right? And there was a
Mm.
whole bunch of drama that happened with Tom Schultz and everybody else in the band.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Dude, like Boston was never the same. Like Boston kept
No.
going, and albeit it was different though. It wasn't the thing that everybody loved about Boston, right? So there is something to say about that. And I feel like, you have to kind of balance everything in perspective. I think holding each other accountable is really important. Not getting too relaxed is definitely important, right? You need to still have
Yeah.
the drive, the motivation, and you need to inspire each other. You need to support each other. If you start turning against each other because one person's doing more than the other, or one person has different priorities now in life, which absolutely happens. Some people, they start a band, they have no kids, and then over time they get a kid and they're like, hey, I want to focus on my kid and my family. I can't be out
I've
late night all the time now doing all these
yeah.
gigs. Some
I've
people,
gone through
they
that. That's tough, man. That's
they
really tough.
change through the course of life, and sometimes you have to be willing to accept that and adjust. And if it's not something you're willing to budge on, then you have to be willing to let go, and move on. It's very, very tricky. So it's a lot of gray area in this matter. Having picking out the best members for your band, I think, comes down to what is the long term goal for that person. Do you see eye to eye on that first? And then I think it's honestly, you should treat it like any interview for a job. Like,
Yeah.
what's your history? How many bands have you been in? Oh, you've been in 20 bands in the past 2 years. That's probably not a good track record of
That may
staying
not be too
with
good, dude.
longevity. Things like that. You want to make sure that that person is trustworthy, that they have a good, foundation, one that they're up to par musically, right? If you're playing extreme metal, man, like you can't expect a guy who's playing blues to be a part of that. He might like the music, but he may not have the chops. And sometimes chops is like integral, especially for something like progressive metal or
Oh yeah.
extreme metal. These are like super demanding type of metal genres that you gotta account for that. So lots of layers, man.
That's where that whole friendship thing comes in at too, Ken, is like, you may be good friends with somebody and you both may think starting a band together is a good idea, but if you're wanting to play some intense style and maybe your friend is just a kind of like a okay guitarist or bassist or whatever, or drummer, but doesn't quite fit the profile, but you go into it anyway because you're best friends and you want to do this together, that can be detrimental. And about the friendships, those have been destroyed because of bands. I remember
Absolutely.
being uh, in one of the early bands I was in, and it did not long-term damage, but it could have, I think, had we kept going that direction, to some friendships that I have today. That it almost hurt some friendships back in the day. Which brings me to this point, guys, is you also like let's say it's your band and you're forming this band. Another good question to ask too is yourself is, are you looking for an actual band, or maybe it's you and your buddy, you're both up to speed and you want to start the band, and are you actually looking for other members, or you might want to consider what they call hired guns. And there's a lot of people that do that. There's a lot of people say, okay, well, I'll be part of your band and I'll record your tracks for X amount of money and go tour with you for X amount of money. So that's just another option, that kind of gives you a little bit more control over your process. And then you don't have to worry so much over the emotional pain that you, you might go through with other
Yeah.
people that have the same shared stake that you have.
Yeah, because I think it
Ken, is that something you've thought of for
absolutely,
for anything you've done?
absolutely. I think a big part of it is bureaucracy and politics.
Hmm.
So you got people in your band. If each person has a portion of power in the band, that makes things more complicated. So
Oh God, yeah, it does, dude.
you
Yeah,
know, and you might find, not saying this happens for everybody, but it can go one of two ways. It can either enhance what you're doing, because people are working together, or it could severely be an obstacle. So if somebody just does not get along with a certain idea, and you really like feel like this needs to go in this direction, damn man, you got some resistance happening, and you got to get
yeah.
over that. You got to get through that. And how do you do that? Well, that takes some time and discussion and trying to understand the other person's point of view and debate and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, sometimes, I'm me got personally, I take so much time with my process that
Yeah.
if I'm going to compromise on something that I'm doing for the sake of somebody's like ego,
Oh,
because
dude.
I
Yeah.
want a little bit more spotlight, man. Like I want a solo, you know, that could be like very off-putting for me. And it's like
Yeah.
that wasn't the intention of the vision. You have to also think about it like, am I serving the song by doing that, or am I just serving somebody's ego, right?
That's a
Huge
big thing. Yeah.
huge thing. I think a lot of us forget that sometimes. I love the fact, by the way, they face this as saying, I just want me and single girls. Well, I got something to say about that, because it's like, are you doing the music because you want to feed your ego, or do you want to feed the soul, right?
Yeah.
So That
It's a big difference.
that's a big difference. And by if you're going to feed the soul, you're more inclined to do what's best in terms of songs, right?
Yeah.
Is the song right? Do I feel that emotional captivating like immersion from this tune? Or am I just doing this because I want to show off something, right?
That's why so many people don't make it, especially guitar players. I'll pick on us guitar players, myself included, because we often like to shine, and even if it's a subconscious thing, we often like to be the guitar players is again. I sent you that message today. Hey, I can't hear my solos on a project I was helping you with, but yeah. But that's the thing. A lot of guitar players do have that ego, even if it's at a subconscious level. It's like, I've got to be heard. And a lot of times we don't know when to back off and let the music take place. Good example is like, and I don't want to get too off track here, but a good example is like letting your guitar solos back off and maybe cutting them in half at times and letting the rhythm section a little bit room for a bass solo instead. But I think that kind of brings us to our next point as far as forming a band, and that's setting clear expectations from the beginning. And of
Sure.
course, after that, we'll talk about like principles and values, which, it almost sounds like we're starting a company here. But like Ken said, you do have to think of this. If you're serious about it, you have to have some business sense coming into this as well. So, that's that. So setting clear expectations from the get-go, even if it's just you and your friends starting this, you need to sit down and have like maybe a businessy conversation and say, what do we expect? Like, what do we really want this to be? Write out a mission statement, write out a plan, have some kind of guide that you're gonna go by, and establish clearly up front what are the expectations from one another, what are the expectations from people that we bring into the band or people you want to bring into the band. So Ken, have you had to have some of these conversations? Because I know Homeric is a huge project, dude. And I know some of the things you went through with that, but have you ever had an experience like that where you set expectations, or maybe you didn't set expectations? Failed in this area plenty of times.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are well, I've done both hired guns and permanent members for one. When it came to the
Okay.
hired guns, expectations were pretty clear. I think we could
Yeah,
all agree.
yeah,
It's like,
that's
hey, you're
easy.
hired to do this, right? And that's what I'm
Yep.
paying you for. When it comes to the permanent members, that's where things get a little more tricky. And this is why we're talking about this today, right? So when we get to permanent members, from the get go, it might not be so clear because
Yeah.
everything is very new and you don't know exactly where things are going to go. So, over time, I think it's safe to say you need to analyze your inner circle and you need to see who's around you, what are they doing, and re-up that evaluation. That's why we always get evaluations when we're at work, right? Hey, you got a
That's true. Yeah.
satisfactory, right? We're trying to evaluate you every year so that we can see what's your progress, where are you going, right? What's going on. And if you get too relaxed about that, I sure as hell did, right? At some point, people start to get comfortable where they are, yet still having expectations of assumptions. They're not actually written down anywhere where it's finite or set in stone. Everyone has begins to assume certain things. And if you don't make those things clear, somebody might be expecting, let's say, for example, you're the lead person on this project. So, naturally you might consider yourself probably the producer of the project. But if you haven't made it clear that you're the producer, right? Somebody in the band might be like, "Hey man, like I'm a producer too." Yet
I'm the
maybe
boss.
maybe yeah, or maybe I'm the boss, right? Yeah, but you did like
Yeah.
10%, 20% of the work instead of the 80, 90%, right? So that then gets really hazy and that's where fights start because there was a misunderstanding and that misunderstanding grew and grew and grew and grew over time until it was unavoidable to see And it was like, oh yeah, we're not on the same page here.
Oh man, yeah,
No. So if you need to constantly evaluate, and you need to have that discussion, and you need to be like, hey, I need to sit down with you. I need to talk to you about how we're doing. Are we seeing eye to eye? These are a couple points that I want to make clear, right?
yeah.
And this is where we're trying to go. This is where we are now. What are you doing? Right? So, are you promoting the shows? Right? If I haven't seen you promote the shows, we need to talk. Right? So, because
That's a big thing, Ken. That's a
otherwise, it's
big
going to
thing,
be like, we
especially
need to
today.
talk about what it is you're getting out of the band. And that might be a
Yeah.
point where somebody, if they're comfortable, they're gonna come at you with resistance. They're gonna be like, "Why are you coming at me, bro? Why are you like attacking
Yeah.
me?" And it's like, dude, like we got this is a business, and
Yeah.
people many times don't think that way. And if that person is in your band thinking that, it's like just something that they love to do, then it's a hobby for them. It's not a profession for them. And that's when you need to make a decision, because the longer things go on, the harder things become, right? To make certain decisions, excluding people, firing members, that becomes a
Yeah.
lot harder when they're in for so much longer. And you have,
More emotional involved.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, more emotion, more ties. Then you begin, it's like, again, if you're invested in a marriage for 20 years and you get a divorce at 20 years, you're just like, dude, you're
Yeah.
like wrecked because you've invested so much of your life into this one
Tr-
person, right?
Trust me, I know, dude.
It's different than having a girlfriend for 6 months and breaking up with her. Then
Right,
it
right.
hurts, but it's like, I'll move on. I'll be okay. 20 years with a in a
Yeah.
marriage is hard to have a breakup, you know?
You've accumulated debt and all this other crap, So yeah, it's and I think one of the things that we can do, guys, to help mitigate some of these things that could happen is, we talk about setting clear expectations, but also, knowing your own principles and values and sharing that with one another and sharing that as a band, and let me just clear like quickly just break down the difference between the two, because a lot of people will think principles are the same thing as values, and no, that's not true. Principles are the things that do not change. Think of principles as like a law. People never break the law breaks them, if you think about it, right? So the principles that you set your band upon, those are the things that you need to truly stick to no matter what. Now, your values are going to be how you carry those principles out. And I think these things are important. These are things that most bands do not ever think about, will not ever cross their mind. And I think it's why bands struggle and they have so many problems. Because if you agree on those principles that you're going to set your band against, that you're going to measure them against, and those values that your bands have, and you expect all the members to have and uphold, then that's going to help you get through some of these other things that come up. And other things will come up, of course, but knowing what you stand for, right? Knowing the values that you carry, that your band carries, your mission statement, so to speak, and constantly staying aligned with that, and in making sure that other people are that come into the band that you hire, or let's not hire, but we'll say the people that come in to the band as a member, they need to understand what those principles and values are, and they need to be in agreement with them. And I know it sounds like Ken and I are like like interviewing people for this job. So, what do you think about this position? You're going to sit in a cubicle all day and rot for 12 hours. That's not what we're doing, but you do have to treat, you do have to treat your band like that, though. You have to have a set of principles, guys, and you have to have a set of values, and that mission statement. Otherwise, you're just a garage band.
Right.
Nothing wrong with
It
that.
needs structure.
But that's not, it's not when we started Metal Mastermind. We started Metal Mastermind to really help you guys that are serious about making things work in your
Yeah.
music. So,
Yeah.
Ken, tell us about some of those things, some of the values that that you maybe wanted your band to have, but maybe they didn't have, and how that affected you guys.
When it came to Homeric, again, I had assumed, right, and I had assumed that they wanted it as bad as I did, which is
Mhm.
wrong to assume, because there's a reason why there's the 1% versus the 99, because
Yes, dude.
yeah, not everybody's in the 1% club. Okay, so for somebody who's like dead set on making this like their life mission, right? Like
Yeah.
nothing's going to turn them away. Even if they have jobs, they're always going to find a way to focus on making this one thing that they're really passionate about happen. People who are not that are very passive about it, right? And I had, I mean, I think everybody who's watching this today probably knows that Jason and I we took the same marketing course. We were very serious about developing our music brand and all this kind of stuff. So by doing that course, I learned a ton of new things that I never knew before. And I was sharing this information with them, but not once I gave them the login information, stuff like not once did they ever actually initiate themselves to do it. And that's because they didn't actually invest financially in the program like I did, right?
Right.
If you're given something, if you're given a castle, that castle can be taken away, right? If you're handed something, you're going to expect handouts in life.
Yeah.
If you had to dig it out of the mud and build it yourself, you'll never expect a handout. You'll always be incentivizing yourself to do more, right? Because that's how your mental process is working. It's like, all right, I just got to expect that I got to do it or else it's not going to happen. Rather than if you're expecting, let's say like the leader in your band to take care of everything, you're going to be like, all right, well, I'm just going to kind of chill out, ride the wave a little bit, right? See how far the bandwagon will take me until he catches on that I'm not doing shit for him and I'm really just a leech, right? So you get those people all the time. So when you're talking about, expressing values, I think it's important and probably happens maybe after going through an experience like that. I think it becomes a lot more clear to you. I think failing is just one more pebble towards success, because now you understand certain things that didn't work and you can avoid those towards your success, right? You need those failures. Those are really integral to succeeding. So if you are able to recognize, right, these personality types that are not very focused, that becomes then a value that you truly want to see in somebody else that you bring on board, right? Yeah. That's why we have something like Mental Mastermind, because we have our own values. We have a track record of adhering to those values, and we can trust each other for that. So there is there is a big trust between someone like Jason and I, because we recognize that and we respect that between each other. When it comes to somebody that you started a band with, you don't necessarily know the intentions of that person. So that's why I always say you need to evaluate people over the course. You need to see what's in your inner circle. And you need to say, okay, well, one, I need someone who's, everybody always says this, I need somebody who's serious, right? Okay, well, what does serious mean? Okay, does it mean that you commit to paperwork and saying, hey, let's write it down. Let's make this official. Let's make this a business, an LLC for our band. Let's trademark our logo. Okay, if somebody's giving you that stuff and telling you, let's do that, okay, you're sensing real seriousness. And if they're going to say, I'm going to give you this money so that we could do this, that's another important part of it. Financial contribution, right? You want to big thing. Look. Here's one thing I know. It's money isn't everything, but money is the only thing that's measurable.
Yeah.
Right? So we can't say like, okay, look, man, I love you. I love you as an individual, and you're an amazing guitar player. But you don't put your money where your mouth is, right? Look, man, I even bought guitar pedals for my guitarist.
What, dude?
What?
Say this.
Right? Exactly. If I'm doing that, something's wrong. Because I'm the drummer. Yeah. I'm the drummer. I should not be buying guitar pedals for my guitarist. My guitarist should be investing in his own gear, right? So if I have to make up for that, nuh-uh. Ain't happening,
Yeah.
right? So I ended up, of course, since we're talking about castles and stuff like that, right? If that castle can be taken away, yeah, I took my guitar pedal back.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that you don't deserve that. So
No,
in
you're absolutely right. That's crazy, dude. And the funny thing is, guys, when you real quick, Ken had mentioned LLC, and we're not giving out business advice here, so please, no business or legal advice. But however, and I think in most states here in the U.S., when you form an LLC, and you can do that as a band, uh, check with your accountant, of course, but you do get to write off certain things like gear and stuff like that, as long as it's being used, for that business that you're in, which a band indeed can be a business. So just a little side note on there when you start taking this thing like extremely seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of like contracts and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to have a sunset clause. Now, what is a sunset clause? The sunset clause basically says we're going to make a contract that expires on a certain date because we're going to reevaluate where we are and make a
Ah,
new contract.
I
Okay?
like that, dude.
If
I
you
like
start
that.
a band and you said, okay, everybody from the top, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%, everybody's even, right?
Yeah.
And then you find out 2 years later that one guy is doing 80% of the work and the rest are doing 20. It's no longer fair to say 25 for all,
No,
right? You need to
not at
reevaluate
all.
and say, okay, look, I'm doing a lot more for the band. And you guys, right now, you're a little comfy. And if you want to stay there, that's fine. Just be willing to take a lower cut. You know? It's like you're not going to get the whole gold pot from the leprechaun, at the end of the rainbow.
Right.
It's you're
Right.
gonna we're gonna divide that differently now. And look, if people don't want to do that and they're like, nah, I still want my 25. All right, well, either step it up and I'm going to give you like 2 months to get your act together, or you're
Yeah.
out of the band. You know?
Gone. Boom.
Um, and if look, and it came down for me, it came down to having to fire everybody from my band. I
Yeah, you
had
wiped it clean,
I
dude.
wiped the whole slate clean because
Yeah.
I saw that the whole entire poison that was infiltrating this band
Yeah.
spread everywhere, and
Sometimes that happens,
it
man.
does
Sometimes that definitely happens.
because sometimes people conspire, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's not because of maliciousness.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about survival and preservation of what they have, right?
Yeah.
They want to retain the power that they have or the financial obligation and reward for what they were putting in, whatever. And their perspective is skewed in that sense. You could say that my perspective is skewed too. But hey, of course it is. Because if I'm doing so much work, then it needs to be reciprocated, right?
Yeah.
So that need if and of course if you are the person who started this band and you have, let's say, more control than others, like for example, I had control of all the recordings, right? Because I am the recording engineer for this project.
Yeah.
I am
That's
the
you.
producer, right?
Yep.
I had the ability to call the shots because I had those assets to do that. Now, I made the decision. I made the hard decision. I was like, okay, it's not working out, and it's going to go a different direction without you. And by saying no to one, I said no to all because
But yeah.
they all had the identity of together. And I was like, okay, that really hurts. And it took a long time to bounce back from that, but it was a necessary step in progress. And that's okay. You take one step back to take two steps forward.
Yeah.
And
You had to do that though, because the other thing is too is negativity in a band can spread like wildfire. And in this case, you had to ditch everyone.
sure.
Uh, but sometimes you can cut that one person off before it spreads to the other band members.
Mhm.
It's like your workplace. People like to go to the coffee break room, and then all it takes is one person to say something negative about someone else, and they kind of magically get everyone on board with that thing. It's like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I remember this person did that, and boom, then the whole room just is clouded with negativity. So that can happen in a band. and that can seep through like poison, not like Poison the hairband, but you know what I mean. When I think of Poison, I think of the Alice Cooper song Poison.
Oh
That's what I
yeah,
think.
man.
Just a
Oh,
side note. But
damn that
dude,
river,
so as far as
man.
payment goes, though, how did you deal with payment? Like, because I want to kind of harp on your last band, Homeric, to give that as an example, or your current band, Homeric, but the last, your last band when everybody was involved. I want you to give everyone an example of how you guys divvied up payments as far as like streaming sales, CD sales, and that sort of thing, merch sales, and even royalties and all that stuff. How was that handled, Ken?
Well, I was lucky enough that it never got to a point where we were actually earning money. It was
Okay.
all being reinvested back into the
Okay.
biz.
Good. Good.
So, you
Good
know,
thing in this case.
yeah, in this case, it's one of those situations where you're actually grateful for what happened because before anything got too serious, where it's like
Yeah.
you're moving big amounts of money, it didn't even
Yeah.
get to that point. So I was able to wipe the slate clean and say, okay, I don't have to worry about these people anymore. They're just out of my life.
They're
And
just gone. Yeah.
yeah, so but it could be a situation that is definitely very very sensitive if there is a lot of money being moved. I think for example, I think Slayer when it came to like Dave Lombardo. Did you know that
Yeah.
Dave Lombardo was only getting paid like $40,000 a year with Slayer?
Dude, I had no clue.
Dude,
Wow.
yeah, Tom Araya was making bank in comparison.
Yeah.
So you had members of the band and also Kerry King. He's like making bank too, man. But like Dave Lombardo, he left Slayer because he wasn't making the money that he thought he deserved. And you're talking about a
Yeah.
legendary drummer here, right? This is Dave
Yeah,
Lombardo.
dude. Yeah.
You'd expect Dave Lombardo to be making bank with Slayer too, but it didn't happen that way. And they had that disagreement, so that's why he broke off.
Yeah.
So, and I forget if it was like 40 or 60,000, but something, it was definitely a lot
Vastly
less,
underpaid for such
vastly
a big
underpaid
a
for what he
band,
should
dude.
have been. And he was basically getting paid, just for doing those shows. He was, I don't,
He was like a hired gun, not even part of the band, basically.
exactly. It wasn't, yeah, he wasn't, I don't think he was really in on those royalties. I
Yeah.
guess because, you had guys like Kerry who was like writing the songs with Tom, and it was hard to justify, I guess, Dave for being a songwriter in that sense. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just my, you know,
That's
assumption
a tough
here.
thing, though,
But
Ken.
yeah,
That's a very tough thing. You've got your songwriters in the band. I almost think it's sometimes a good idea for that one or maybe two people to be the band starting out and own the rights to everything, and then kind of like make that agreement that hey, you can be in the band and this is your cut, and like you said, have that sunset agreement, which is very good. Yeah, you're part of the band, but this person or maybe these two people are the owners. You do need a captain steering the ship, I think, or maybe two captains or whatever. So, and those people will naturally will get paid more, the songwriters and such, but you got to compensate the other people fairly as well if you want them to feel like they're truly a part of the band.
yeah,
Otherwise, they're going to always feel just like, well, I'm just not really part of the band. I'm just kind of getting paid a low cut, a little piece of the pie here to be a part of this. And I think Dave Mustaine went through that because Megadeth is his brand, right? I
yeah,
think he went through that with Dave Ellefson, the bass player. I don't know if you remember the big conflict that they had
sure,
many, many years back. That was huge, and that was big news in the metal community as well. But they had a falling out. Dave Ellefson was trying to sue Dave Mustaine for some of those royalties and things, because again, if you and I write a song today and put it out there, uh, you know, that song's out there forever. And that
right,
song will always collect whatever revenue comes in from the royalties or streaming and whatever. And even if you and I broke up, and guys, we're not breaking up, by the way, we haven't even written a song together, but but even if we broke apart, though, we would have already had to establish how those you'd have to plan for that event basically as if it would happen, even if it may never happen. You had to establish that ahead of time as far as how the money's going to be split up going forward if you split off. So
yeah. I think it's a really really good idea to take things as they go, and if you're I know one type of model that works somewhat for most bands is if you're writing a song and you're part of that process, that's something completely separate from, let's say, playing a live show. Um,
Yeah,
where
that
if
is.
you're playing a live show, you could divvy up the earnings um, evenly. If of course if you're talking about like stadiums here, then maybe that's a little different because now that's a lot of money coming in, and
That is,
if
dude.
you're
Yeah.
if you're talking about now splitting up merch and all that kind of stuff, that could be different too, right? So
Yeah.
I think specifically performing, everybody on stage should be paid evenly on
Yeah.
stage, right?
I agree with that. I totally agree with that, dude.
If
Absolutely.
it's a band, of course,
Yeah.
right? If you're a solo artist hiring different people, that's different, right? You can
It's
get
a
the
different
most of the
story. Yeah.
money and you pay whatever you pay you guys. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's a band and everybody's like in it together, then split the performance evenly between each other. For
Yeah.
merch, that depends on what the business arrangement was. If you set up
Yeah.
everything for the shop and you made all the designs and all this kind of stuff, then
Yeah.
you should deserve to be compensated for that, right? Um,
That's true.
and then of course when it comes to writing songs and studio and stuff like that, I feel like the person most invested in it should be the producer. Um, and
That's a good point. Yeah.
whether that's your that's why we have different tiers on albums. You have
Yeah.
producer, then you also have executive producer, right?
Yeah.
Executive producer is the guy with the money, right? That you might have another producer, but they don't have that power as the executive producer, being that that person's going to make the final call,
Yeah.
whereas a producer might just contribute ideas and creativity to all of that, as well as the executive one. They could both be the same role creatively, but one is investing more. So you have that executive producer for that power. Um,
It's
and
like a
that,
corporation, dude. It's like
yeah,
it's like office
it
space. Look
is
at
like a
8 different bosses.
corporation, and you have to think about it as a business. We
Yeah.
keep coming back to it because it is. The
It
music
is.
industry is called the music industry for a reason. Billions of dollars move every year within the music industry. So we need to treat it as serious as any other corporation out there, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't take it that way, then this becomes more of a hobby and you're just doing it for the pleasure of music, which is totally fine.
It's totally fine.
Just
Yeah.
don't expect the revenue to come in, right? And don't
Right.
expect the responsibility and that kind of stuff so again, it's scarier to kind of move in that direction because there is so much more pressure on maintaining the band in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's big reward to it too. You do get more satisfaction out of, I think, in life if you're a musician, if you can live off of what you're doing, and if that's
Absolutely.
if that's having to either constantly play gigs or you have to sell, a bunch of merch in order to do that. That should be a blessing because many people don't even get to do that. So
Yeah. That's true.
I think one of my goals is just to be able to live off of doing what I'm doing. I don't have to make $1 million a year off of my music. That'd be nice. Although I feel it's just like, look, give me enough so I can just keep doing what I'm
Just live.
doing and
Right.
live off of
Absolutely.
it. That's like really the dream. Beyond
That is the
that,
dream.
beyond that, you're going to different galaxies. You reach for
Yeah.
the stars, and now you're in the galaxies. If you're like getting any more than that, so it makes it really hits home for me in that sense.
Yeah.
And you have to play it smart. You have to play it like a business. You have to think about all the things that a business person needs to take into account. Giving spreadsheets on what you're spending on your budget, your company as people. All of these things are vital to your success.
Yeah.
So when it comes to those, you know, Jason, I'm thinking like, how have you dealt with your own conflicts within the bands that you've played, or even in your own business? How have you overcome conflicts?
Well, we had And I'll share kind of a failure real quick with you. I was in a kind of like a rock band, 80s style rock band called The Guys. And I think I've told you guys about that before, but I was the lead guitar and lead singer for the band, which are two huge tasks. And of course, that's all that's the two biggest egos in the band normally as well. And I've never really considered myself to have an ego, but sometimes you subconsciously have one without even realizing it. And the band really needed to go a different direction than what I was pushing for.
Mm.
And I don't want to get into nuts and bolts of that, but the other band members knew that, and it was causing conflicts in style, and people were just getting burnouts. Like, we need to change. And of course, me not dealing with that, me kind of like putting my head in the sands, like, no, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. I'm the leader of the band, and this is. And again, I wasn't coming off that way, but I think it came out that way. One of the things we would do sometimes we started doing is we would just sit down and have a meeting and get together and kind of throw darts at one another. It's like, what's some of the things that you don't like about that I'm doing that need to change? And that kind of helped, rekindle some of the friendships. Of course, that band was sort of short lived after a couple of years, and then the friendships got better after that
Yeah.
because the band was no more, but that's really, that's really the big conflict that I had. And, I was in the middle of conflicts in bands before that. There was a specific guitar player that was just kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of always going through things and just wasn't quite working out with the band and just always seemed to be kind of like a problem child to the band. I didn't really see it that way. I saw it in a different light, but again, I was new to the band that was already established. So that was one of those things. Again, I think the key is though is really communication, is being open and honest with people. But even bigger than that, I'll say, Ken, is being able to listen with what's called empathy. And that just means being able to listen and shutting down what you think the situation is and being able to really step inside that other person and understand where they're coming from, even if you think they're wrong. I've given this analogy before, but a lot of people think there's two sides to the coin, heads or tails, but there's a third side. There's that edge of the coin where you can see both sides clearly. And I think we have to look at things like that and listen again with empathy to what the other person's concerns are. That said, I think if you guys follow a lot of the things that Ken and I talked about today, you will have much less conflict in your band if you establish some of these things from the start. And it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect by any means, but I really do think that following these things that we talked about today, because Ken, we've had a lot of experience in this, and I know you guys have been in bands as well, but just following some of these things and setting those principles for your band, setting those values, having that upfront conversation and expectations, are laid out, it'll reduce the amount of conflicts you have later. And Ken, you brought up like one of the most important things like that I want people to take home today. You talked about the sunset contract, and I think you need to extend that even beyond the contract itself, but have regular what we call team meetings. And that way there's never any question of knowing where everybody's at because you always know. You regularly say, hey, we're not practicing today, guys. We're just going to sit down and chat together and just go over any concerns. Some of those conversations may be painful, but Ken, you even mentioned if you do things now instead of wait till later, it's much less painful. So that's kind of our spiel to you guys today is set those expectations up front, be up front, and then have those regular meetings with one another where you just have open lines of communication.
Yeah, like anything in life, man, don't bottle things up.
And don't bottle it up.
You wanna say it right there and then, as kindly as possible. Of course, you don't want to say, "Hey, man, you're a fucking asshole." That'll always start a fight. But you wanna be upfront. You don't wanna bottle things up because, people tend to do that all the time, and then they'll notice certain patterns, and then they'll take note of it, but they won't say it because they're afraid of offending. And then before you
Yeah.
know it, if it becomes too long, it will offend because it's like you've thought about this the whole time, but
Yeah.
then what were you really thinking? I can't trust you, right?
There's a
All this,
distrust.
yeah, all
Absolutely.
this stuff happens, and it's just like, damn, like holy crap. I think we're all guilty of that in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
So we just, yeah, treat it as that, in that sense where you, like you said, Jason, having open communication, lines of communication where you can be honest and expect, having, a forum to voice your concerns.
Yeah.
It's actually a smart idea that, maybe once a month, if you're having regular rehearsals, like even once a week or twice a week, one of those days at least is just dedicated to just coming together just to talk. Um,
Yeah.
uh, it just can't be every time, you know,
Right. Right. Right.
because
Yeah.
I've seen that too, where it's like,
It's
and
too much. Yeah.
yeah, you're coming and you're just literally just coming to hang out, and that's not what this is about. You need to take that seriously. Also, um, you mentioned a great point of what's going on with somebody, in their life, and what they're going through, and what are they bringing. Are they the problem child, right? That is such a true statement. I did have somebody who was very much that way, and it was always something. And they're like, I don't know why this always keeps happening to me. And that's, I almost want
And
to
that's
throw it.
why.
I almost wanted to throw it in their face, like, it's like, dude, like, because you keep attracting it to your life, like
Yeah.
you keep thinking about problems, and problems come to you, So, um, you know that's a discussion for another day about law of attraction and that kind of stuff, but really, man, it does play a true role when it comes to when you see the patterns of certain people. Do they have things together in that sense? Not everyone's perfect, of course. People are going to have debt, people are going to have illnesses, they're going to have life choices that they've made in the past that affect what they're doing now, of course.
Oh yeah.
That's just
Sure.
how it is, and we can't say, okay, we need the perfect individual. That doesn't exist. That's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But you need to have, I think part of it in the values is the intentions behind it. Are they made clear, right? Let's revisit, right? We're talking about a band. It's a very much of a marriage between people, and
Absolutely.
seeking out the best members of your band. What are their intentions, right? Are you doing this as a solo project? Are you hiring people? Do not mislead people. I've been in that situation too, where I was misled into thinking it was a band, but it really was a solo project, and he was using me. Okay,
Oh, dude.
where it's like this guy, he told me up front, he was like, I don't want you to write the songs. I want to write the songs. I was like, okay, so this is a solo project. And he was
Right.
just like, no, it's a band. I was like, no, it's not.
It's
You're
not a
gonna
band,
pay
dude.
me now.
No.
You're gonna pay me now. I'm walking away. And he ended
Yeah.
up using like my drum patterns and stuff like that. But he hired somebody else to play it on his record, and I was like, okay. But there's
Oh,
you
dude.
need to have yeah, I've been through some shit, man. You need to have clear expectations for people. You need to say, look, this is a solo project. You are a hired gun. Or this is a band. This is why I expect you to play, how I expect you to play your part with me,
Yeah.
because this is how I'm going to play my part. I'm going to do
Right.
this. Lead by example. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. What are you going to give me? What are you going to give the band? How are you
band,
going to
yeah.
contribute to the whole? What's your end? Are you good with social? I don't really like to post that much. Okay, you take on social media. That would be great, right? You have those roles, and you have clear expectations, right?
Yeah.
Principles and values, where do they come from? Who is this person that you're working with? What is their track record, right? What's their upbringing like? You want to have someone who you can resonate with on a personal level that will also contribute to the success of the business in the long term. As far as payment, right? And we're talking about who's getting paid, how much. That depends on what your business model is going to look like. Is it the solo project like we talked about? Is it the band? Are you going to say, okay, well, everybody splits everything, right? If you do that, we recommend having a sunset clause to your agreement. Put it in writing, right? Put it in writing, because you want to, when you put something in writing, not only is it reassuring yourself, it also reassures everybody else, because now they have something to refer to. And it's,
Right.
some people mistake with like an interband agreement, thinking like they're gonna get screwed over, but it's really not. That's not the purpose of an interband agreement. It's not to screw somebody over. The purpose of that is to make things clear with the discussion and saying, okay, I'm gonna hold you accountable, just like you're gonna hold me accountable,
Yeah.
because this is what we agreed to. So that's all it is. And you don't be intimidated by that. The wording may be a little bit funny or stuff like, it sounds a little lawyerly, but that's all in the context of saying, look, I'm taking it seriously. If we're making it serious, it's like no different than an operating agreement for a company. Okay. And then you work that stuff out. And however you choose to go forward, whether it's divvying up all the proceeds or you're taking it as, okay, well, we're going to treat songwriting differently from live performances to merch. That's all going to be, however you all agreed. So make that clear as well. Everything, guys, the whole thing, if you haven't taken anything else, is be clear with what you're trying to do.
You gotta be clear.
I think that's like the big word today is clarity. Because if somebody doesn't understand or is not on the same page as somebody, that leads to just a bunch of conflict.
No, you're absolutely right, dude. That's you have to have those clear expectations. You have to have everything, clearly written out, and it is a business at the end of the day. It really is, and I know that doesn't sound, us artists, us musicians, we want everything to be just artsy fartsy, and that's awesome. You keep it that way, but at the same time, though, you have to have those parameters put in. So because what happens is when you start making money as a band, it can change things, right? It can change things. And oftentimes money will reveal the true person. Money
Right.
doesn't really change people. I want to clarify this. A lot of people say, well, money changes you. No, it doesn't. It just brings out that real person. If
Right.
you start being someone different because you have a lot of money, well, that someone that you're being now with money was deeply embedded in there before you had money,
Right.
right?
Money just
Yes.
amplifies everything.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't change people, it amplifies people.
I like that word, amplify, dude. I want to plug into my EVH amp and amplify everything right now.
Yeah, man. It's just
No,
like,
but you're right. It does.
yeah, man. I mean, like, listen, like, let's relate it to the guitar for a second, right? And you plug in to distortion,
Yeah.
On your amplifier.
Yeah.
When you do those bends, it becomes way more apparent with more
Yes.
distortion and amplification on that, right? But when you play without distortion, you play clean, you don't really hear a lot of those bends.
don't
It's
notice
kind
it.
of like
Right.
unnoticeable, right? So it's the
Yeah.
same thing in the sense with people, right? You like that. So we're going to
I do like that, dude. Yeah, it's cool.
we're going to use that as an analogy here. And people they don't change. It's very hard for somebody to change. Very, very, very hard. People are very much set in their ways. We're creatures of habit. All it is that money gives us liberty to do other things with what we already have embedded within us. So that just
Right.
becomes much more exalted and amplified within that context. We do have a question here from DW.
DW.
He asks, what if home recording metal musicians write all the songs down and wants to find real people to play I'll also say his or her songs, are they still technically his or her band now?
Absolutely. I mean, so if you're and I'm in this boat too, DW. So I'm a solo artist. I write all my music, here in my studio. It's mine. I register it under my name and all that good stuff. So, if I were to start a band under me, Jason Stallworth, or let's say I named it a band, called it something else, but it was mine, I would need to be upfront with the people that come into the band that I'm either hiring you as a hired gun to help record in the studio. You get X amount for recording in the studio, and you get X amount per gig that we play. And like Ken said, we can revisit that contract at a later date as it grows, or if it doesn't grow, either way, you can go that route, hire the people, or they can be in the band and playing with you and be part of the band, but understand that, me as the artist, I'm going to collect the royalties from the songs because I wrote the songs. I'm going to collect the,
Right.
the streaming sales, and you being in the band, you'll just get a percentage of those gigs. So that's one way you can do that. Now you may start to form the band, and this is where we get in some gray areas, and you have, let's say, 5 songs written that you wrote, and your new band is playing it, and you're the artist for those 5 songs, you're the songwriter, but you may have songs in the future that you co-write with someone. So you would need to establish the agreement for those specific songs. And you can even release the entire album, and the album has 5 songs that you wrote, and then there's 3 songs you co-wrote with someone. And the systems that you go into, the platforms that you use to release music, make it very easy to do that. You just literally, and this is something that we'll have to probably do one day, Ken. We'll have to give a session on independently releasing your music through like
Absolutely.
CD Baby or TuneCores. That's something that we need to get into at some point. So we'll do that for you guys. But so yeah, you can do that, DW. They're your songs. You wrote all the songs. They're yours. So you just have to come to an agreement, on that. Now, as the songwriter, you may want to give a percentage of your royalties under a contract for a certain term of that song to your band members. That's your decision, though. You make that call because again, it's just your music. That's just you being friendly, I guess. I was gonna do a project, and I still may do it with some two good friends of mine going way way back. We said, hey, we've got all these old songs that we used to play that I primarily wrote. But I said, guys, if we do this and release something, I want you to change the lyrics in those songs and give your input so that we can let's just split everything down the middle. So that's a decision I would make, right?
Yeah, there's also, in addition, I'm just going to tag on to them. Most people, by the way,
Sure.
they tend to be a little bit more possessive of what they've created. So, I mean,
Yes,
naturally, right?
yes.
You
It's
write
ours.
you write a song, it's your song. Okay, great.
Yeah.
You should copyright it under your name. Some people, the few, there you could also do it this way. You could copyright it under the band company as well, and
Yeah.
it's owned by the company itself, and however you've structured the company, then it will distribute to that. So
Right.
if you wanted to make it like, okay, well, we're all kind of involved in it, like let's say it wasn't very clear as to who was maybe the real songwriter of it, maybe it was everybody kind of really did put a good chunk into that, then you can copyright it that way and say, okay, well, it belongs to the band and not necessarily any one person. And then you would distribute after the proceeds go to the band. That's one
Gotcha.
way to do it. So, but typically, to kind of, not because that's a lot of extra work. You gotta, do all the auditing and all that stuff. Most people don't want to do that. People just want to say, okay, I wrote the song, I should own it. That's fine. And if you own it, anybody else that contributes, right? Then it's just it's still your song. Because really, understanding one thing, and we could talk about music business in another episode too, where we're talking about copyright. Copyright is melodic lines, the line that you could actually sing, right? So, pick any song that somewhere over the rainbow, right? That line, that's a copyrighted line
It's covered.
of
Yeah.
melodic music, right? So you have to copyright that. Whoever writes the melody that people can sing, that is copyrightable, right? Unless you're writing something like Johann Sebastian Bach, where you're writing, then that's also copyrightable. But the main melody is what we're talking about. The main
Yeah.
melody is the part that we're copywriting. So if somebody contributed, guitar parts and they played all the chords and stuff like that, that's not
Yeah.
copyrightable. That's just a progression. You can't copyright a progression. You only can copyright the melody. Okay.
So it kind of does suck for other instrumentalists. I mean, and the copyrights mainly go to the songwriter, which is a lot of times, I don't know, I want to say the singer, but sometimes the singer doesn't. You could be the singer of a band and not own. You could be the front person and singer of a band and not own any part of a song because your keyboard player wrote it or your guitarist wrote it. I think Nightwish, their guitar player, Impu, and then the keyboardist, I think they write a lot of the songs.
Yeah.
So Floor Jansen, for example, you know, I don't know how they structure that. They're huge in Europe, of course, but she doesn't own those songs. And I don't
Right.
know if she put input in on the last album or whatever, but all the older songs that she's singing now, so she's probably not getting paid near as much as the band is getting paid. The songwriters for that band are getting paid. So
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely. So, of course, guys, it's up to your discretion. All right.
it
Nothing
really is.
is
Yeah,
ever absolute. The only absolute is when it's written down and submitted to something like Congress. Okay.
yeah,
So if you submitted it that way, that's what it is. That's the absolute. So just at your discretion. Use your best judgment. That's all we'll say. That being said, Jason, man, this was such a meaty episode. Love that everybody had questions and
yeah,
contributed to
dude.
the comment section. Really love you guys. You guys are amazing. You're so engaged. We value you guys. We're coming out, with some really, really great ideas for the next couple months. We're gearing up to do some really, really cool stuff for you. So
Yeah.
just stay in tune with stay in tune with our emails. We're going to be constantly giving you updates. We'll of course, we'll always
Yeah.
do our weekly Wednesdays here at Metal Mastermind. Don't forget that if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe at metalmastermind.com/join. You will get our quick guide. It's totally free to the ultimate home studio, so that you're getting all the bits and pieces of information that you need, either to get started or to expand what you already have. And the things that we're talking about in a couple months, they might talk a little bit more about that. So we're gonna end it on that note, guys. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps the channel out, especially if you hit that like button. Really gives us more points for YouTube and helps us grow.
Yeah, it does.
So please make sure you do that. And we really love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining.
And
Jason.
wait for next week. We've we've already got next week's live planned out. There's probably going to be a little bit of controversy. I'm not going to give it away quite yet. Well, of course, we'll share the link with you guys over the next few days so you can set your reminder. But yeah, one last thing I want to ask, guys, from Ken and I, is I just posted the link to our free guide. If you would please take that link and share it on your Facebook, and even if you want to email that to some people, some of your musician friends, please do that. That will help get them on our list. And of course, they'll get the reminders as well. So if you don't mind doing that, that will help us out tremendously. And we really do appreciate that. Guys, thank you so much for joining Metal Mastermind.
Horns up.
Yes, horns up, guys. See you next week.
See you later.